They say the people closest to you can hurt you the most. I used to think that was something people said after bad relationships or family fallouts, words thrown around by those too broken to move on. I'd hear those lines and shake my head thinking, that'll never be me. I believed love, especially family love, was sacred. But life has a way of proving us wrong, in ways we never expect. My name's Richard Hale. I'm 57 years old. And if you were to look at me a few years back, you'd probably think I had it all figured out. I wasn't some big-shot millionaire living in a mansion on the hill. No, I was a working man, a builder. I built houses, offices, schools, real places where people made real lives. My hands were rough, my back was sore, but my heart was full because everything I did for my daughter, Emily. My wife, Laura, passed away when Emily was only 13. Cancer. It came fast and took her even faster. Watching the woman I loved fade away, that was the first time I truly felt powerless. But Emily, she gave me a reason to keep breathing. I remember standing at Laura's funeral holding Emily's hand so tight that she whispered, "Dad, you're hurting me." I didn't even realize it. I was just so scared of losing her too. From that day forward, I made a promise. I'd protect her no matter what. Every early morning when I left for the job site, I'd glance at the photo of us on the kitchen counter, me in my work boots, her with pigtails covered in flour from helping her mom bake cookies. That photo reminded me why I was fighting. Every brick I laid, every contract I signed, every dollar I earned, it all had her name written on it. People talk about success like it's a blessing. But let me tell you something. Success is a mirror. It shows you who truly stands beside you, and who's only there for the shine. When my company started to grow, so did the people around me. Distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years began calling. Neighbors I barely knew started waving from across the street. But I never paid much attention to all that noise. My world began and ended with my daughter. I still remember her graduation day and the way she smiled, the way her eyes searched the crowd until they found me. I thought, that's pride, that's love, and maybe it was back then. But love has a strange way of changing when money enters the room. You see, betrayal doesn't always crash in like a storm. Sometimes it seeps in quietly, disguised as concern or affection or ambition. It starts small. A smile here, a lie there. You brush it off because love makes you blind. You trust because you want to trust. And before you know it, the same hands you once held are the ones pushing you off the edge. When I say my daughter betrayed me, people assume I mean she yelled at me or we had a big falling out. No, it wasn't like that. It was colder, cleaner, calculated. It started with her husband, Ryan, the kind of man who wears a perfect smile and a perfect suit, the kind of man who calls you sir while secretly checking your wallet. At first he was charming, and too charming. I ignored the unease in my gut because Emily was happy, and that was all that mattered to me. But happiness built on deception never lasts. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was feeding the very beast that would eventually turn on me. My business, my home, my savings, all the things I had built with sweat and sacrifice, were quietly being drained from under me. And the people behind it weren't strangers. They were the ones I would have died for. There's a kind of pain that doesn't show up on your face. It just sits deep inside you, heavy like wet cement, until one day you wake up and realize you're buried in it. That's what betrayal feels like. One morning I woke up to an empty house. Not physically. Emily was still there, her laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen as she talked on the phone. But emotionally it felt hollow. That warmth I used to feel when she was near, gone. I looked at her and saw someone else. Someone I didn't know anymore. And then came the moment that changed everything. I overheard her and my own daughter talking to Ryan about what's left in Dad's accounts and whether he's too old to notice a few transfers. My heart stopped. My chest went cold. You ever have that moment where your brain refuses to believe what your ears just heard? That was me. I walked back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and just stared. 30 years of love, trust, sacrifice, all reduced to a line about what's left. That was the day I realized my daughter had sold me out. Not for survival, not out of desperation, but for greed. And you know what's strange? I didn't feel angry. I felt clear, like a fog had lifted, because when the person you love most betrays you, something inside you dies, but what's left behind is sharper, stronger, and painfully honest. That night, I sat alone in the living room, lights off, thinking. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. That sound used to comfort me. Now it mocked me, counting down the seconds of my foolishness. And then, out of nowhere, I heard soft footsteps. It was Clara, my maid. She'd been working for me for years, quietly keeping this house together while my world fell apart. She saw me sitting there and asked gently, "Mr. Hale, are you all right?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, but she didn't press. She just placed a cup of tea on the table and walked away. No questions, no pity, just kindness. The kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. And that night I made a decision, and not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of truth. If my own daughter could betray me for money, then maybe it was time to teach her, and the world, what money really means. It's not about the number in your account. It's about the weight of your actions, the value of loyalty. So I decided, right then and there, that when I leave this world, I won't leave my fortune to Emily. I'll leave it to someone who actually cared, to the one person who never lied, never schemed, never used me. Clara, she didn't have my blood, but she had my respect, and that's worth more than gold. That was the day I stopped being blind, the day I saw people for who they truly were. And it all started with the moment my own daughter sold me out. For 30 years, my mornings began the same way. The soft hiss of the coffee maker, the low rumble of trucks starting outside, and the faint chill of dawn clinging to the air. It was a rhythm my body knew better than any alarm clock. Every sunrise meant another day of work, another day of building, another day of pushing forward. I wasn't born into wealth or comfort. I didn't inherit a business, and I sure as hell didn't get a head start. I earned everything with my own two hands. My father used to say, "A man's worth isn't measured by what he owns, but by what he builds." I took that to heart. As a kid, while other boys were still learning to ride bikes, I was already up on roofs, hammer in hand, patching leaks with my old man. The smell of sawdust and wet cement became part of my skin. When I turned 17, I dropped out of school and started working full-time in construction. It wasn't glamorous. Long days, blistered palms, and a paycheck that disappeared faster than it came. But I didn't complain. I learned. I listened. I watched how small efforts, day after day, turned into something real. Years later, when my father passed, I took the little savings he left and started Hale Construction. Just me and an old pickup truck that coughed every time I turned the key. I didn't have investors or fancy degrees, with just grit. And somehow that was enough. By the time I hit 50, I wasn't rich like the folks you see in magazines, but I was comfortable. I had a company I could call mine, a few loyal workers who stuck by me through thick and thin, and a 2-story house I built with my own hands. That home wasn't just made of wood and nails. It was made of dreams, sweat, and memories. But success has a strange silence to it when you've got no one to share it with. After my wife, Laura, passed away, the laughter in my house vanished. She had this way of filling a room, you know? Even on her worst days, she'd hum while cooking or tease me for always misplacing my reading glasses. When cancer took her, it didn't just take my partner. It took the color out of my world. For months after the funeral, I'd wake up expecting to hear her voice. And when I didn't, I'd just sit on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space beside me. It's strange how someone's absence can feel louder than their presence ever did. The only thing that kept me going was Emily. She was my reason, my pride, my anchor. Everything I built, everything I saved, it was for her. I wanted her to have the kind of life her mother always dreamed of for her. I sent her to good schools, paid for college, made sure she never had to worry about a thing. Emily was bright, sharp as a whip, always had this spark in her. Clever, ambitious, and sweet when she wanted to be. She'd come home from school and tell me about her dreams of starting her own business. Maybe traveling, maybe helping others. I believed every word. I believed in her, but people change. Sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. After college, she came home with a man named Ryan. I still remember that first dinner like it was yesterday. He walked in with that salesman's smile, firm handshake, and a voice smooth enough to sell sand to a desert. Everything about him felt rehearsed. He was polite, too polite, complimented the house, the food, my watch, even the way I carried myself like a man who's earned his peace. That line should have told me everything I needed to know. Because a man who recognizes peace only does so when he's planning to disturb it. But Emily adored him. She looked at him the way Laura once looked at me, with that dangerous kind of trust. And I wanted her happy. That's all I ever wanted, so I swallowed my doubts and shook his hand, even though every instinct in me screamed don't. I told myself he was just ambitious, that he'd settle down, that maybe I was just being protective. Fathers see danger in every shadow near their daughters. I convinced myself it was that, just paranoia. Around that same time, life threw another person into my path, Clara. She came to me through a neighbor's recommendation. A middle-aged woman, maybe in her 40s, quiet voice, humble eyes. She started working 3 days a week, cleaning, cooking, organizing the house. I didn't think much of it at first, just another helper. But Clara wasn't like the others who came and went. She never complained, never snooped, never even looked curious about the life I lived. She had this stillness about her, like someone who'd seen enough of the world to stop chasing noise. She'd hum old songs while sweeping, laugh softly to herself when the radio played something from her childhood. Sometimes she'd find me sitting in the study, staring at the same page of a book, lost in thought, and she'd simply say, "You should eat something, Mr. Hale." Then she'd leave a plate of food and disappear without waiting for thanks. It was strange how the quiet presence of a stranger could bring more peace than the company of people who shared your blood. Over the next few years, the house filled with visitors again. Emily and Ryan would drop by, at first just to check in, then to borrow things, then to ask questions that felt more like probes. "How's the business doing, Dad? You ever think of retiring? Who's helping you with your accounts these days?" At first, I brushed it off, but Clara noticed. She always noticed. One evening, as she was washing the dishes, she said softly, "Be careful what you share with those two, sir." I looked at her, half smiling, half amused. "You think my daughter would ever hurt me?" She didn't answer right away, just dried her hands and said, "Sometimes people don't mean to hurt the ones they love. But love can make folks greedy, for attention, for comfort, for control." I remember her words clearly, though at the time I didn't take them seriously. I thought she was just being cautious. But hindsight's cruel, isn't it? You only see the truth when it's too late to stop it. Still, back then, I trusted. I trusted Emily because she was my daughter. I trusted Ryan because she loved him. And I trusted Clara because, well, she never gave me a reason not to. Funny thing, in a house full of people who said they loved me, the only person who actually saw me was the maid. She didn't see me as a wallet, or a stepping stone, or a man with assets and accounts. She saw a lonely old builder, still trying to fix everything, even the cracks in his own family. And maybe that's why, deep down, when the storm finally came, Clara was the only one who stood steady. You ever look back on a time in your life and realize that every single red flag was waving right in front of your face, but you just chose not to see it? Maybe because seeing it meant admitting something too painful to accept. That was me. I wasn't blind because I couldn't see the truth. I was blind because I didn't want to believe it, not about my own daughter. After Emily married Ryan, things changed slowly, quietly. At first it felt good. The house, which had been silent for so long after Laura's death, was filled with laughter again. They'd come over on weekends, sometimes unannounced, bringing pastries from that bakery downtown Laura used to love. Emily would set the table, Ryan would pour coffee, and for a few fleeting moments I'd believe everything was normal. That family still meant what it used to. We'd sit around the dining table, and the conversation always started with harmless chatter. Emily would talk about her new apartment, her job, the neighborhood. Ryan would crack jokes, charm his way through the room. He was good at that, talking just enough to sound interested but never long enough to show his true face. But soon I started noticing patterns. Small, quiet ones that you can only recognize when you step back. Ryan always found a way to steer the conversation toward my business. "How's the company doing these days, Richard?" He'd ask casually as if he wasn't already thinking 2 steps ahead. "Still got that investment property near the lake? What's your plan for retirement? You've worked so hard. Don't you think it's time to relax?" At first I laughed it off. I told myself he was just trying to make conversation, trying to connect with me. But there was something in his tone, something calculated. Like every question wasn't curiosity, but a probe, a test. You know when a man's eyes don't match his smile? That was Ryan. His mouth smiled, but his eyes, they were busy measuring me. Clara noticed it before I did. Of course she did. She always had this quiet intuition about people. She could sense what words didn't say. One afternoon after Ryan and Emily left, she was clearing the dishes. She didn't look up when she spoke, just said softly, "Sir, be careful what you share with that one." I chuckled, half amused, half dismissive. "He's family now, Clara," I said. "Emily's husband." She dried her hands and looked at me with this expression, a mix of worry and restraint, like she wanted to say more, but knew I wouldn't listen. She just nodded and went back to work. I thought she was being overly cautious. I wish I'd listened. The months that followed were a blur of smiles and slow manipulation. It started with little suggestions. Emily would say things like, "Dad, you work too much," or "You should take some time for yourself." It sounded innocent enough. What father wouldn't like hearing his daughter care about his health? But then those soft words started shaping into something sharper. "Dad, you've built this amazing business. Maybe it's time to let someone younger help out." Someone younger. That someone, of course, being Ryan. I laughed it off, made some joke about still being strong enough to lift a toolbox, but deep down something in me flinched. It wasn't the idea of stepping back that bothered me. It was who she wanted me to hand things over to. One evening, Emily and Ryan came over for dinner. I remember it vividly. The smell of roasted chicken, the clinking of cutlery, the low hum of the TV in the background. Everything seemed normal until Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and said, "Richard, I've been thinking. You've worked your whole life. Maybe it's time to let someone manage the day-to-day stuff for you. Someone who understands modern systems, online contracts, digital bids." He went on and on, painting a picture of how he could help the business grow, how I could finally enjoy my retirement. Emily smiled through it all, nodding like she agreed. That smile. It wasn't the sweet, innocent one from her childhood. It was rehearsed, controlled. The kind of smile people use when they're trying to sell you something. I looked at both of them and felt something twist in my gut. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was confusion, a quiet kind of disbelief that I couldn't quite place. After dinner, when they left, I walked into my study and sat down at my desk. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. I looked around at the framed photos on my shelf, Emily's graduation, her wedding, old memories of happier days. I thought about Laura. What would she have said if she were still here? She always had a way of reading people. She would have seen through Ryan in an instant. But me? I was a fool for family. Weeks turned into months and the pressure kept building. Emily called more often, not to ask how I was doing, but to talk about plans and security. She'd say, "Dad, you've got to think about the future. You can't manage all this forever." I started noticing how she phrased things differently now. Your company had become our company. Your house became the family home, subtle but telling, and every time Ryan came by, he'd offer to help with paperwork or contracts. He'd linger near my desk, pretend to be interested in construction projects he didn't understand. Once I caught him flipping through one of my financial binders when he thought I wasn't looking. He laughed it off, saying he was just curious. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept turning over Clara's words in my mind. "Be careful what you share with that one." It was around that time that something in Emily changed too. She started dressing differently, talking differently, sharper, colder. She spoke to me less like a daughter and more like a business associate. I'd try to reminisce about old times, or her first bicycle, her mom's cooking, but she'd brush it off, always in a hurry, always distracted. The distance between us grew wider, like a crack in a wall that you ignore until it splits the whole thing apart. Then came the day that confirmed my fears. We were sitting in the living room, just the two of us. The afternoon sun was pouring through the blinds, cutting across the floor in long stripes. Emily was scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. Out of nowhere, she said, "Dad, you don't need to work anymore. Ryan can handle things just like that. No build-up, no hesitation. Just a sentence that felt like a knife slid between the ribs. My hands went cold. I tried to smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Handle things?" I asked softly. "Like what?" She shrugged, still scrolling. "Everything. The business, the accounts, the properties. You've done enough. You deserve a break." But that wasn't what she meant. I could hear it, feel it. The words "you've done enough" weren't kindness, they were dismissal. She wasn't trying to protect me. She was trying to replace me. That's when it hit me. They weren't visiting me anymore. They weren't checking in out of love or care, they were circling me, like vultures around a man who's still breathing but too blind to see the shadow overhead. And the saddest part? I didn't stop them, not yet. I still wanted to believe my daughter was the same little girl who used to wait at the gate after school, running into my arms yelling, "Daddy!" I still wanted to believe love could outweigh greed, but deep down I knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. That truth would come soon enough. And when it did, it would break everything. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always arrive with thunder and shouting. Sometimes it slips in quietly, through the creak of a door, the shuffle of papers, the absence of something that was once always there. That's how it happened to me. Not with a bang, but with a silence that screamed louder than any explosion. It was a Friday evening, one of those dusky hours where the light fades slow and soft, turning the sky gold before it slips into gray. I remember that day like it's etched into my bones. I'd been at the construction site all day, supervising the final stages of a project that meant a lot to me. My back hurt, my hands were stiff, but I felt proud. Even after all these years, I still loved the smell of sawdust and wet concrete. It reminded me that everything I had, I earned. When I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels hollow. I remember calling out, "Emily, Ryan," expecting to hear footsteps or laughter. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the clock in the hallway. Then I saw it. My office door. Half open. Now, I'm the kind of man who notices things like that. I keep that door closed, always have. Not because I was hiding anything, just because it was my space, my little world of order and history. Every folder, every paper in that room told the story of my life's work. When I pushed the door open, I felt something heavy drop inside my chest. My desk drawers were open. Folders were missing. The safe was slightly ajar. My filing cabinet, half empty. At first I thought maybe Clara had been organizing things. But no, she never touched my financial documents. Only Emily or Ryan had access to those. My heart started to pound. I picked up a few scattered papers. Contracts, property records, and right there in the middle of it all a letter from my lawyer. I didn't even have to read it to know. You can feel betrayal before you understand it. But I read it anyway, and with every line my vision blurred more. Transfers of property, changes in account authority, a legal shift of ownership for estate efficiency and tax simplification. Signed, by me. Except I hadn't signed a damn thing. Well, not knowingly. I remembered Ryan handing me a few documents a few weeks back. "Just some routine papers, Richard," he'd said, smooth and confident as ever. "Helps keep your taxes low this year." I didn't question it. Because when your daughter's husband tells you something, you assume your daughter's behind it too. And when your daughter smiles and says, "Dad, Ryan handles this stuff now. Don't worry, you don't worry, you just sign." Because that's what trust does, and it lowers your guard. They didn't steal from me overnight. They dismantled me piece by piece. When I realized what they'd done, I felt something inside me break in a way I didn't know could happen. Anger came later. First came disbelief. The quiet kind where you just stand there and stare at the wreckage of your own faith. I called Emily. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Dad," she said, cheerful like nothing was wrong. "Emily," I said slowly, carefully, "where are my files?" There was a pause, just a second too long. Then her voice came back, calm and dismissive. "Oh, Dad, don't worry about that. Ryan and I took care of everything. It's all safe." "Took care of what exactly?" I asked. "Your accounts, the company, the properties. We just shifted some things around to make it easier," she said, her tone soft, practiced, controlled. "You don't have to deal with all that anymore. Ryan knows what he's doing." My throat went dry. "You did what?" She sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. "Dad, it's for your own good. You're not getting any younger. Ryan knows how to handle business better than you." Those words, better than you, they cut deeper than any knife. Better than me? The man who built the company from nothing but a pickup truck and a set of rusty tools? The man who worked through storms, through injuries, through grief after losing his wife, so she could have a better life? Better than me? I couldn't even find the words to respond. My tongue felt heavy. My chest burned. There was so much I wanted to say. so much I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, I just sat there, quiet, because sometimes silence hurts more than anger ever could. Emily kept talking, trying to justify it. Her voice turned colder, businesslike. "We just moved a few things around, Dad. It's still ours. Nothing's really changed. It's just more efficient this way." But I knew the truth. Everything had changed. Everything. By the time I hung up, I wasn't angry at her. Not yet. I was empty. Completely emptied out. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark in my office, staring at the empty shelves where my life used to sit neatly labeled and filed away. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. Time stopped meaning anything. At some point, Clara must have come in. I didn't even hear her footsteps. I just felt the soft clink of porcelain beside me, a cup of tea steaming gently in the dark. She didn't ask questions, didn't try to comfort me with words. She just placed her hand on my shoulder, a simple gesture that somehow said everything, and in that small act, that quiet kindness, I felt more love, more sincerity than anything my daughter had given me in years. I remember whispering, almost to myself, "She took everything, Clara, everything." Clara didn't say a word. She just stayed there, her hand steady, her presence calm, because she understood that sometimes when a man's heart breaks, the worst thing you can do is try to fix it too soon. Outside, the night was still, but inside it felt like a storm had torn through my soul. They hadn't just taken my money, my company, my home. They'd taken something far more valuable, my trust, my faith in family. The belief that love could never turn into greed, and once that's gone, you're not the same man anymore. That night was the death of the man I used to be, and the birth of the one who would make them regret ever thinking they could take me down. I didn't wake up one morning craving revenge. That's the funny thing about it. It doesn't hit you like a sudden burst of rage. It grows quietly, like a slow-burning ember that refuses to die. In the days after Emily and Ryan gutted my life, I didn't want vengeance. I wanted silence. I wanted peace. I wanted to sit on my porch, drink my coffee, and feel like my world hadn't been stripped bare. But peace doesn't come when you've been robbed of your dignity. It doesn't come when the people you love look at you and see only what you can give, not who you are. For a few weeks, I drifted. I'd wake up before dawn, stare out the kitchen window while Clara made breakfast, and pretend I still had something to fight for. She never asked questions, never pitied me. She'd just slide a plate in front of me and say, "Eat something, Mr. Hale." That small, steady kindness, and it was like a thread keeping me from unraveling completely. Then one morning, while the first rays of sunlight spilled through the blinds, I felt something shift. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe it was the sound of my own heartbeat, or maybe I just had enough. Whatever it was, I knew that sitting in the ruins of my own trust wasn't peace. It was surrender. And I wasn't ready to surrender, so I made a decision, not one born out of hate or fury. It was colder than that, sharper. I called my lawyer, the same man who'd unknowingly helped them strip me of everything I'd built. His name was Martin. I'd known him for 20 years, trusted him through every contract, every deal, every decision, and yet even he had been fooled by their charm. When he picked up, his voice was hesitant. "Richard, I've been meaning to call you. I heard about what happened." "I'm so sorry," I cut him off. "Don't be sorry, Martin. I'm not calling for sympathy. I'm calling for clarity." There was a pause. "Clarity?" "Yes," I said. "I need to rewrite my will." The silence on the other end stretched for a few seconds. "Of course," he said finally. "Do you want to leave everything to your daughter?" I let the question hang in the air before answering. "No, Martin. Everything I own, every dollar, every share, every property, will go to someone who never betrayed me." He chuckled nervously, like he thought I was being dramatic. "You mean?" "To my maid," I said. "Clara." He blinked twice, I'm sure of it, even though I couldn't see him. His tone changed immediately. "Richard, are you certain about that? I mean, she's your employee. You've known her how long?" "Long enough to know she's the only honest soul in this house," I said. My voice didn't shake. It wasn't anger that carried it, it was conviction. Emily and Ryan took what wasn't theirs because they thought I'd never see it coming. But Clara, she's never taken more than her paycheck, and half the time she refuses even that when I give her extra. Martin hesitated, then sighed. If that's truly your wish, I'll prepare the documents. Good, I said. And Martin, keep this between us. I want no copies sent to the house. You'll hold the originals in your vault. Understood, he replied quietly. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel powerful. I just felt still. Like a storm had passed and I was standing in the wreckage, but for once I knew where to start rebuilding. That same week, I began pulling my strings, quietly, methodically. While Ryan strutted around like he owned my old company, I began something new. A fresh business. Smaller, leaner, and this time legally registered under Clara's name. She didn't know at first. I handled the paperwork, the filings, the licenses. Years of experience in construction and contracting had taught me how to navigate every legal loophole. What they didn't realize was, I had built the system once and I could build it again. When I finally told Clara, she froze. We were sitting in the kitchen. Same old wooden table, same soft light through the window. She looked at me, eyes wide with confusion. Mr. Hale, she said softly, you can't do that. I'm just a maid. You can't put all that under my name. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that comes from happiness, but the kind that comes from resolution. Clara, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because of you. Because you're the only one who's never lied to me. The only one who showed up when everyone else walked out. She shook her head. But people will talk. Your daughter, my daughter made her choice, I interrupted. Now I'm making mine. Clara's eyes softened, but there was sadness in them too. You're a good man, Mr. Hale. Don't let their greed change that. I looked down at my calloused hands. Hands that had built homes, schools, offices, lives. It's not about greed anymore, I said quietly. It's about truth. It's about showing them what loyalty really looks like. So I worked in silence. No loud declarations. No revenge speeches. Just quiet moves. I sold off what I could from the old company without Ryan realizing. I rerouted contracts, changed suppliers. Whispered to old clients, if you want the same quality, the same man behind the hammer, follow me. And slowly, word spread. Clara's name began appearing on business forms, invoices, job boards, and though she blushed every time she saw it, I could tell. Part of her understood. It wasn't about the name. It was about legacy. Meanwhile, Emily and Ryan were living large. Posting vacation photos, buying new cars, dining at expensive restaurants, all funded by what they'd stolen. But I didn't care, not yet. I wasn't after their comfort. I was after their illusion of control. Every night before bed, I'd write in my old ledger, the one they hadn't taken. At the top of the page, I wrote 4 words. Truth wins in silence, it became my motto. My quiet weapon. Because revenge doesn't always have to roar. Sometimes it just has to wait, and I was patient. I'd built a life one brick at a time. I could rebuild my justice the same way. So while they flaunted their stolen riches, I was building something they couldn't touch, a future that didn't need their name, their approval or their love, and when the time came, they'd learn that the man they thought they'd broken had been rebuilding something far stronger, right under their noses. 6 months. That's all it took for life to come full circle. From betrayal to peace, from chaos to quiet. 6 months after I rewrote my will, I started to feel my body slow down. Maybe it was stress, maybe it was just age finally collecting its due, or maybe deep down, once I had set everything in order, my soul knew it could finally rest. The doctors called it exhaustion. Mr. Hale, you need to take it easy, they'd say. But they didn't know what it's like to carry the kind of weight I had carried. The weight of betrayal from your own blood. The burden of holding your pain in silence, of smiling at people who broke you just to see if you'd shatter. Clara was there every step of the way. She'd cook my meals, remind me to take my pills, scold me if I tried to work. And through her care, I realized something. I had spent my entire life building walls made of money, power, and property. But she'd built something far more valuable. Humanity. One evening, while the rain tapped against the windows, I called her to sit beside me. My voice was weak, but my mind was clear. Clara, I said, there's something you should know. When I'm gone, things might get loud, but don't let it scare you. You've earned everything coming your way. Her brow furrowed. Mr. Hale, please don't talk like that. I smiled faintly. It's not goodbye, Clara, it's just a change in address. She didn't understand what I meant then, but she would soon enough. A few weeks later, I passed quietly in my sleep. No drama, no pain, Just peace. And maybe, somewhere deep inside, a faint satisfaction that I had set the record straight before closing my eyes. The day of the will reading came not long after. The sky was overcast, fitting somehow. Martin, my lawyer, called Emily and Ryan to his office downtown. They arrived dressed like they were walking into a photo shoot rather than a legal proceeding. Ryan wore a navy blue suit, the kind you wear when you think you've already won. Emily looked perfect, like she always did when she was pretending to have her life under control. Pearl earrings, soft pink lipstick, and that same smile she'd used on me so many times to get her way. They didn't cry at my funeral. They posed. They mingled. They played the part of grieving relatives while checking the clock, eager to move on to what they really cared about: the inheritance. Inside Martin's office, the air was thick with tension. I can imagine it perfectly. The faint ticking of the antique clock on the wall, the smell of old leather and paper, and Martin sitting behind his desk, his glasses sliding down his nose as he opened the sealed envelope with my final will inside. Emily sat forward, trying to appear composed, but her foot tapped against the floor, impatient. Ryan leaned back, arms crossed, smirking like the whole world belonged to him already. Martin cleared his throat. This is the last will and testament of Richard Hale, dated 6 months prior to his passing. He began reading. The formal parts first, the legal phrasing, the official tone. They weren't really listening. Their minds were already racing ahead, thinking about numbers, properties, and bank accounts. Then Martin's tone shifted slightly as he reached the heart of it. Upon my passing, all properties, funds, shares, and business interests are to be transferred in full to Ms. Clara James. The room went dead silent. Not the kind of silence that feels calm, the kind that burns. Emily blinked, confused at first, as if her brain couldn't quite compute what she'd just heard. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "Who?" Martin looked up, his expression professional, almost gentle. "Ms. Clara James," he repeated. "Your father's housekeeper." Ryan went pale. His smirk vanished. The color drained from his face so fast you'd think he'd seen a ghost. Emily, on the other hand, snapped. "That's impossible," she shouted. "She's a maid. This has to be a mistake." Martin sighed softly and slid a copy of the will across the desk. "Mr. Hale was very clear about his wishes, Ms. Hale. This document has been verified, notarized, and witnessed. Everything is legal and binding." Emily's hands shook as she grabbed the paper, scanning it like she could find a loophole hidden between the lines. Ryan leaned over her shoulder, his jaw tightening, eyes darting. This can't stand," he said, his voice trembling with rage. He wasn't in his right mind. "Clara manipulated him." Martin leaned back in his chair, unbothered. "If you'd like to contest it, you're free to hire counsel." But Mr. Hale anticipated that response. He left behind medical documentation confirming his sound mental state at the time of signing, and video testimony. That's when Ryan's confidence cracked completely. He looked like a man watching his castle crumble stone by stone. Emily threw the papers down, tears flooding her eyes. "He loved me," she cried. "He wouldn't do this to me." Martin adjusted his glasses and said softly, "He loved you more than you'll ever understand. That's why he did this." There it was, the line that hung in the air like a verdict. They both sat there, silent, shocked, humiliated, broken. Outside that office, Clara stood in the hallway. Martin had asked her to come. She hadn't wanted to, but he insisted she should be there. When Emily and Ryan walked out, their faces pale and their pride shattered, they saw her standing there. For a moment, no one spoke. Just 3 people frozen in the tension of unfinished history. Emily glared at her, eyes red. "You," she hissed. "You took everything from me." Clara didn't flinch. Her voice was soft but steady. "No, Emily, I didn't take anything. Your father gave me what you threw away." Ryan muttered something under his breath, and something bitter, and stormed off. Emily stood there a moment longer, trembling, then turned and followed him, and that was that. The house, the company, the accounts, all legally belonged to Clara James. But here's the truth most people wouldn't understand. I didn't do it to hurt my daughter. I didn't want her to suffer. I wanted her to wake up, because wealth isn't measured in dollars or deeds, it's measured in loyalty, compassion, and the courage to do what's right when no one's watching. Emily had everything I could ever give, but she traded it all for greed. Clara had nothing, but she gave me humanity when I had none left. So in the end, justice wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was quiet, poetic, the kind of justice that whispers, "Now you understand." And as for me, I imagine wherever I am now, I'd be sitting on some porch beyond the clouds, a cup of coffee in hand, watching it all unfold with a faint smile, because finally, after all the noise, lies, and betrayal, my story ended the way it was meant to, with truth winning in silence. The world moved on after my death, as it always does. Time doesn't stop for anyone, not even for a man who once thought his wealth could shape it. The estate was settled, the lawyers moved on to other clients, and my name slowly faded from newspaper headlines and business magazines. But what mattered most wasn't the noise I left behind, it was the silence that came after and the way it was filled. Clara didn't change overnight. She didn't suddenly turn into someone new, or start flaunting her new life like so many others might have. The morning after she became the legal owner of everything I once possessed, she still rose early, brewed her tea, and sat quietly by the window the way she always had. The world expected her to become someone else, to buy cars, jewelry, designer clothes, or maybe disappear into a life of luxury. But Clara James was not like that. Instead of moving into my mansion, she turned the lights off, locked the doors, and said softly to herself, "This house was his home. My place is somewhere else." Weeks passed and the gossip spread like wildfire. People whispered her name in cafes, in church gatherings, in market corners. The maid who inherited a fortune. Some called her lucky. Others called her cunning. Few understood the truth and that Clara didn't win anything. She was entrusted with something sacred, and so quietly she began to build something new. A few months later, on a calm spring morning, a sign went up in front of a modest old building downtown. The building wasn't grand. It was simple, with pale yellow walls, wide windows, and the faint smell of freshly painted hope. The sign read, "Laura's Home, a shelter for widows and single mothers. Laura, my late wife." My heart, the woman whose compassion had once been the soul of our family. Clara named it after her, saying it was a way to keep both of you alive. Inside that shelter, life began again for dozens of women who had nothing left. Women who had been abandoned, widowed, or broken by life's cruelties. Clara welcomed them not as a benefactor, but as a sister. She cooked with them, cleaned with them, sat beside them as they cried, and laughed with them when hope began to return. Every corner of that building carried her warmth, from the small library filled with second-hand books, to the nursery painted with soft clouds and starlight for children who had never known peace. She turned my money, something cold, mechanical, and soulless, into something that breathed. And perhaps that was my true legacy, not the empire I built, but the kindness that grew from its ruins. Months later, on an ordinary afternoon, the past walked through those very doors. Emily. She looked different now, thinner, quieter, and with eyes that no longer sparkled with entitlement but dimmed with exhaustion. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide the weight she carried. Life had humbled her in ways money could never protect her from. Clara was in the kitchen when Emily arrived, helping one of the mothers bake bread. When she saw Emily standing there, hesitant, uncertain, she wiped her hands and came forward, not with judgment, but with calm kindness. "Emily," she said softly. "It's been a while." Emily didn't speak at first. She just looked around, at the women sitting together, at the children laughing in the corner, at the mural painted across one wall with the words, "Kindness is wealth." She saw Clara handing out food to strangers, smiling with the same peace she used to envy, and that's when something inside her began to break, not from anger this time, but from realization. For the first time, she saw what her father had seen all along. Clara hadn't taken her inheritance. She had transformed it. All the bitterness, the greed, the obsession with what she had lost. It all felt so small compared to what she was seeing now. She approached Clara slowly, her voice barely a whisper. You did all this?" Clara smiled faintly. "We did. Your father and I, his money, my hands. It was his idea in a way." Emily swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I thought you stole him from me." Clara shook her head gently. "No, Emily. I only gave back what he'd already given to the world. He loved you. You just couldn't see it then. Emily's voice cracked. I didn't just lose his fortune, did I? Clara stepped closer, her eyes soft. No, she said quietly. You lost your father long before the will was ever read. You lost him the day you stopped understanding what mattered to him. Those words sank deep into Emily's soul, sharper than any accusation could have been. Because in that moment she knew Clara was right. That evening, after everyone had gone to sleep, Emily walked through the shelter alone. Her footsteps echoed softly against the wooden floor. She ran her fingers across the photographs on the wall, smiling faces of women and children who now had a home, people her father would have been proud to help. Then she saw it, a framed picture near the entrance. It was of me and Laura, taken decades ago, and below it a small plaque with a simple inscription, "For Richard Hale, who taught us that love once given freely never truly dies." Tears streamed down Emily's face. She sat on a bench near the door, hands trembling, whispering to the empty air, "I'm sorry, Dad." For a long time she stayed there, silent, broken, but somehow lighter than before. From somewhere beyond, I like to think I was watching. Maybe from that quiet corner of eternity where old souls rest, watching Clara carry forward what I couldn't finish. Watching Emily begin at last to understand what love truly means. Legacy isn't about wealth or property. It isn't about names etched into marble or numbers on a bank screen. It's about the lives we touch, the kindness we pass forward, and the lessons that outlive our failures. So even though my heart stopped beating months ago, my story didn't end. It simply changed form, because somewhere in a small shelter named Laura's home, laughter still echoes. Bread still rises in the oven. A little boy still learns to write his mother's name, and somewhere in all of that, in every act of quiet compassion, I still exist. That is the true legacy I left behind. If you're listening to this, maybe you found my story in some old journal. Maybe it was passed to you by someone who cared. Then I want you to take a moment, sit quietly, and hear this not as a tale of revenge, but as a reflection. You see, betrayal doesn't always come with raised voices or shattered glass. It doesn't always wear the face of an enemy. Sometimes betrayal walks softly. It smiles politely. It says, "Trust me," and you do, because you want to believe the people you love would never turn against you. But the truth is, betrayal most often comes dressed as love. It doesn't tear you apart all at once. It seeps in slowly, a doubt here, a lie there, and until one day, you wake up surrounded by strangers who still call you family. That's what happened to me. When Emily turned her back on me, it wasn't the money that broke me. It wasn't even the stolen company or the forged papers. What shattered me was the realization that the little girl I had carried on my shoulders, the one who used to fall asleep listening to me talk about dreams and hard work, had grown into someone who valued what I had more than who I was. And yet, even in that heartbreak, I learned something precious. Because in the middle of all that pain, there was one quiet presence, someone who didn't owe me anything, yet gave me everything that truly mattered. Clara. She didn't save me with grand gestures. She saved me with small kindnesses. A cup of tea placed silently on my desk, a gentle word when I could barely speak, a loyalty that never demanded to be noticed. I used to think success was about being the strongest man in the room, owning the most, controlling the outcome, but Clara showed me something business never could, that kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you wealthy in ways no thief can touch, because the world measures wealth in currency. But the soul measures it in compassion. I don't hate my daughter. How could I? She's part of me, my blood, my memories, my laughter, my mistakes. No, I don't hate her. I pity her, because she chased what shines but doesn't last. She thought the weight of gold could replace the warmth of love. She forgot that the people who build empires with their hearts don't need to guard them. They live on through the lives they touch. And so, if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of betrayal, if someone you love turns their back, or if greed claws its way into your family, remember this. You can lose everything and still have something priceless left inside you. Your ability to care. Money can vanish. Property can burn, but kindness once given and multiplies. It ripples outward. It finds its way into hearts you'll never meet. That's the kind of legacy I wish for you. Not a fortune in a bank, but peace in your chest when you lay your head down at night. The peace of knowing you chose decency when the world chose deceit. And if there's one thing my story should leave behind, it's this. Don't wait until it's too late to see who truly stands by you. Don't measure love by what people say. Measure it by what they do when you have nothing to offer. The people who stay when the world turns its back. Those are your real riches. Clara taught me that. She reminded me that life's worth isn't built in the hands that take, but in the hearts that give. So wherever you are, whether you're building a business, raising a family, or just trying to find your place in this noisy, greedy world, promise yourself this. Never trade love for luxury, and never mistake silence for weakness, because sometimes the quietest souls leave behind the loudest legacies. And when your final day comes, it won't matter how much you've earned, but how much of yourself you've given. That's what I want you to remember. That's the truth I learned too late. And if it reaches even one heart, then maybe, just maybe, my story still has purpose. It's been a year since I left this world. At least, the world as I knew it. But sometimes I wonder if the dead truly leave, or if we linger quietly in the spaces where our love still lives, because even now, I see them, Clara and Emily, walking through the courtyard of Laura's home. It's a small building, nothing fancy. A white-painted shelter tucked between tall oak trees on the edge of town. The kind of place most people would drive past without noticing. But inside, it's full of laughter, life, and the kind of warmth money can't buy. Every morning, Clara walks through the front gate with that same calm smile. She greets every woman there by name. Widows, single mothers, women who lost everything but still fight to stand tall again. She gives them food, a roof, and most importantly, hope. When she first opened the shelter, she said she did it in my memory. But the truth is, she didn't build it for me. She built it with me. Because everything she does there carries a piece of my heart, my lessons, my mistakes, and my redemption. Emily started visiting a few months after the will was read. At first, she came secretly, parked her car across the street, watched from a distance, then drove away. Maybe guilt kept her from walking in. Maybe pride did, but one rainy afternoon, Clara found her standing outside, drenched, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "Come inside." "Dear," Clara said softly. Emily hesitated, her voice trembling. "I don't think I deserve to." And Clara, God bless that woman, just opened her umbrella, placed it over Emily's head, and said, "Then start by helping someone who does." That's how Emily began volunteering. At first, she barely spoke. She swept floors, served food, and avoided Clara's eyes. But over time, something changed. She started listening, really listening, to the stories of women who'd lost husbands, children, homes. And for the first time, Emily saw what her father had been trying to teach her all along. She saw what real value looked like, not in dollars, not in designer clothes, but in small acts of kindness that ripple outward like sunlight through rain. One evening, Clara found Emily sitting alone in the shelter garden, staring at the memorial plaque on the stone bench, the one that read, "In loving memory of Richard Hale, a man who built more with his heart than his hands." Emily traced the carved letters with her fingers and whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad, I thought I was being smart. I thought I was doing what Mom would have wanted, protecting our future. But I lost you instead." Clara sat beside her and said quietly, "You can't change the past, Emily, but you can honor it." Emily looked up. How? By giving, not taking. By building something he'd be proud of. And from that day on, she did. She became Clara's right hand at the shelter, helped manage the donations, taught women business skills, and started a small scholarship fund for children who'd lost their parents, just like she once lost hers. Sometimes, she'd still break down when a little girl would hug her, or when she saw a father walk in to volunteer. But Clara would just hold her hand and remind her, he'd be smiling right now, you know. Years later, Laura's home grew into a network of shelters across the state. Every one of them carried the same plaque, the same promise. And on the anniversary of my death each year, Clara and Emily would light a single candle in the garden. No speeches, no tears, just silence. And the gentle sound of the wind moving through the trees I once planted behind our old house. That's how love survives. Not through inheritance or names on paper, but through hearts that finally learn to forgive and rebuild. So if there's one last image I could leave you with, it's not of revenge or loss. It's of two women standing in the golden light of evening, surrounded by laughter, holding a candle together. One represents loyalty, the other, redemption, and in between them, somewhere unseen but ever present, stands a man who learned that even after betrayal, love has the final word, because in the end, forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the only revenge that truly brings peace.